Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tin Man's Corner Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm finishing up my Midnight Terrors marathon for you guys. And the first video I'll be reacting to today is 5 Disturbing True Yard Sale Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road in the bag. Okie dokie, here we go.
You know how people say nothing good happens after midnight? I'm starting to think that same rule applies to yard sales after 3 p.m. What happened to me a couple of weekends ago still makes my skin crawl, and I'm hoping that by telling someone about it, I can finally shake this uneasy feeling. It was one of those rare sunny Saturdays in January, and my boyfriend, Matt, had gone out of town for a work thing. I decided to spend the day hitting up yard sales because, honestly, I love a good deal. Around 2 p.m., I was ready to call it quits, my car already loaded with mismatched mugs and a funky old lamp I didn't need. But as I was driving back through a quiet residential neighborhood, I saw a handwritten sign that said, "Yard sale, everything must go," with an arrow pointing down a side street. Against my better judgment and my growling stomach, I decided to check it out. The street was eerily quiet, and I remember thinking it felt like a movie set where everyone had just disappeared. The end of the cul-de-sac was an old house with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn. A few folding tables were set up in the driveway with random junk spread out. Old books, chipped figurines, mismatched silverware. There were no other shoppers, just a guy sitting on a plastic chair, smoking a cigarette.
Okay, yeah, that would be strange, but also, I don't want to sound rude, but every time me and my folks see people set up a yard sale, but it looked like from a distance they got like junk laid out, we ain't stopping. We're just gonna keep on going till we find a place that's got a lot of stuff for sale that ain't broke or chipped. Oh boy, this person better be careful.
He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with greasy gray hair pulled back into a ponytail and a stained flannel shirt. He gave me this strange smile as I got out of my car, like he was surprised I'd actually stopped. "Afternoon," he said, his voice gravelly. "Feel free to look around. Everything's cheap." I gave a polite smile and started browsing. The stuff was mostly junk, but I felt like I had to at least pretend to be interested since I'd already parked and gotten out. As I moved closer to one of the tables, I noticed how silent the neighborhood was. No cars, no barking dogs, no wind even. Just me and this guy's labored breathing. I picked up a dusty book to give myself something to do. It was an old hardcover copy of The Catcher in the Rye, one of those editions that schools hand out. When I flipped it open, I noticed someone had written something on the inside cover. "Keep quiet. He's listening." I felt a weird chill run down my spine. I looked up at the guy, but he was just sitting there, staring at me. His cigarette had burned down to the filter.
Okay, if I see something like that inside of a book, I'll be having alarm bells going off in my head.
And he was still holding it between his fingers, not moving. I quickly put the book back and moved to another table. There was an old jewelry box there, the kind you'd find at your grandma's house. The top was carved wood, but the latch was broken. I lifted the lid and found a small stack of Polaroids inside. At first, they seemed normal, pictures of the house, the yard, a dog. But as I flipped through, they started getting weirder. One was of a woman's hand with a ring on it, her fingers splayed like she was showing off the jewelry. Another was a close-up of a face, but it was blurry, like the person was moving or trying to turn away. The last one made my stomach drop. It was a picture of a woman tied to a chair in what looked like a basement. I snapped the box shut, suddenly hyper-aware of how alone I was. The man was still watching me, not saying a word. I forced a smile, my voice shaking. "Do you take Venmo?" He grinned again, his yellow teeth visible this time. "Cash only." "Right," I said, backing toward my car. I think I left my wallet. I'll be right back. I turned and walked as casually as I could, but the moment I was in the car, I locked the doors and started the engine. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the man was standing now, his hand shading his eyes as he watched me drive off. I didn't go straight home. I parked in a grocery store lot a few miles away and sat there, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to call the police, but what was I supposed to say? That some guy at a yard sale gave me the creeps. I finally convinced myself it wasn't worth it and drove home, locking every door and window behind me. That night, I had the worst sleep of my life. Every creak in the house made me jump. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text. It was an unknown number. The message read, "You forgot something." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Then another text came through. It was a picture of my car, parked in the grocery store lot earlier that day. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and first thing the next morning, I went to the police. I showed them the texts and the photo, but there wasn't much they could do. The number was a burner, and without any real evidence, they couldn't exactly investigate a yard sale. I haven't gone to another one since. I've been double-checking my locks, keeping an eye out for anyone who might be following me. So far, nothing else has happened, but I can't shake the feeling that I was meant to be his last sale of the day.
Oh, yeah, that is creepy. First of all, I just want to point out if I found a jewelry box or something that was made out of wood and the hinges were broke, I mean, that's an easy fix. But if you find Polaroids in it with creepy photos, I would either put it back down and just walk away quickly or buy the box and then take all the Polaroids to the police to see what they could do. But yeah, I'd be scared to death like she would be if somebody just followed me from a yard sale and taking photos. That'll be the last straw for me. Let's continue on with story number 2.
I've always loved yard sales. There's something thrilling about hunting for treasures in other people's cast-offs. And most weekends, my sister Lena and I make a day of it. Last summer, on one of those unbearably hot Saturdays, we decided to hit a few sales in a small rural town about 45 minutes from where we live. The first couple of sales were nothing special. Some overpriced furniture, a few scratched up DVDs, and piles of baby clothes.
You see, that's what me and Mom like to do is go around looking for yard sales. But if we find some that have just either baby clothes or clothes in general, we ain't stopping. Or if I was looking for movies and the DVDs were all scratched up, I'm putting them back down and just continue looking for something else. But yeah, he's right. You always find some interesting treasures among stuff that people were trying to get rid of.
By noon, we were sweaty and starving. But on the way to grab lunch, we spotted a sign that read, "Huge yard sale, free box," with an arrow pointing down a gravel road. Free boxes are usually junk, but once I found a vintage leather wallet in one, so they always pique my curiosity. The house was isolated, set back from the road with fields on either side. There were no other cars parked there, which was odd for such a huge sale. But the driveway was lined with tables piled high with stuff, so we figured maybe we'd just beaten the crowd. A man in his 40s, wearing cargo shorts and a faded baseball cap, waved as we pulled in. "Feel free to look around," he called out. "Everything's negotiable." He seemed friendly enough, so we got out and started browsing. Lena gravitated toward a table of kitchen gadgets while I made a beeline for the free box. It was a plastic tub full of random knickknacks, some old books, tangled jewelry, and a few toys. At the bottom, I found a small wooden picture frame with a photo still in it. It was a candid shot of a little boy, maybe 5 or 6, grinning at the camera. His face was smudged with dirt, and he had this wild, messy hair that reminded me of my nephew. Something about the photo felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I shrugged it off and kept digging. Eventually, I grabbed the frame, a couple of books, and a pair of earrings. figuring I could at least give the photo frame a new use. As I walked back to the car, the man came over to chat. "Find anything good?" he asked, his eyes lingering on the frame in my hand. "Just a few things," I said casually, not wanting to seem rude. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's a nice frame," he said. "Real wood. You sure you want to take it?" I laughed nervously. "It was in the free box, right?" "Yeah," he said, scratching his neck. "Just weird seeing someone take it, you know?" The way he said it made my stomach flip.
Well, then why did you put it in the free box to begin with? If you didn't want to get rid of the frame, you should have kept it. Yeah, something's weird. And I think that boy in the picture that she's described, something happened to him, or he's the one that kidnapped him. But I don't know. I don't want to jump into no conclusions. Let's just continue on with the story.
But I brushed it off as him being eccentric. Lena finished her browsing, and we thanked him before leaving. It wasn't until we got home that things started to feel wrong. As I was unpacking the car, I took another look at the picture frame. The photo of the boy wasn't printed on glossy paper. It looked like it was printed at home, the kind that smears if it gets wet. Behind the photo, there was a folded piece of paper wedged into the frame. Curiosity got the better of me, so I slid the back open to see what it was. It was a handwritten note. "If you find this, please call the police. He's keeping me in the shed. Caleb." I froze, my hands trembling. I yelled for Lena, who came running. When she saw the note, her face went pale. "We need to call the cops," she said immediately. But before we could do anything, I heard a car engine outside. I peeked out the window and saw a rusty blue pickup truck idling at the end of our driveway. It was the guy from the yard sale. He was just sitting there, staring at our house. "Lena, he's here," I whispered. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "What?" She ran to the window and froze. "What does he want?" "I don't know," I said. "But we need to call the police. Now." As I dialed 911, the truck started creeping forward, pulling into our driveway. I gave the dispatcher all the details, trying to stay calm, but my voice was shaking. The operator told us to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for an officer to arrive. The man parked his truck and got out, standing in the driveway with his hands in his pockets. He didn't come closer, but he didn't leave either. It felt like a standoff. Lena and I stayed in the living room, watching him through the window, clutching kitchen knives like they were some kind of shield. After what felt like an eternity, we heard sirens. The man must have heard them too, because he got back in his truck and sped off just before the police arrived. We gave the officers the note and described what had happened. They took it seriously and sent a patrol car to check out the property where the yard sale had been. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow felt like it was hiding someone. The next morning, an officer called to update us. They'd found the shed Caleb mentioned in the note, but it was empty. There were signs someone had been living there. An old mattress, food wrappers, but no sign of the boy. They were launching a full investigation, but I couldn't shake the guilt that I hadn't done more. What if we'd gotten there earlier? What if we'd found Caleb in time? It's been months now, and I still think about that yard sale every time I see a free sign. I don't know what happened to Caleb, or why that man was watching our house, but I've stopped going to yard sales altogether. Some bargains just aren't worth the risk.
Yeah, that is disturbing. I just hope he didn't kill that boy and hide his body somewhere. And he figured he would get away with getting rid of evidence by trying to have a yard sale. He knew it was probably going to backfire, but I can't believe he actually followed them all the way to their house. But I'm glad they called the cops, but I'm just sorry that it was too late. They couldn't find that boy. But I hope they do. But that's just sad to think about. You grab something and you find a note saying that somebody's being held hostage there. They didn't even say anything about if they found the guy or not. He must have hightailed it out of there.
I'm not really a big yard sale person, but last fall, I decided to give it a shot. My fiance Nate and I had just moved into our first house, and I was on the hunt for some quirky decorations to fill up the empty spaces.
Okay.
Our budget was tight, so yard sales seemed like the perfect solution.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you don't have the budget to go buy high-end decor, then yard sales will be your next best bet because you never know what you'll find. And especially if somebody like passed away and it's like an estate sale, you might find something for a good price, especially the older furniture and wall art.
That Saturday, I spent the morning driving around the neighborhood. By the time I hit my fourth sale, I was running low on patience and energy. But this one caught my eye because it was in front of this beautiful old Victorian house on a quiet street, the kind of place that looks like it belongs on a postcard. The yard sale itself was a mix of the usual stuff: clothes, old tools, and random knickknacks. But there was this antique mantel clock sitting on a small table, and it immediately caught my attention.
I do like this house right here. I mean, I would love to live in something like that. If nothing creepy happened in there, that is. Even a ghost haunting the place. But still a nice house.
It was one of those old-fashioned ones with ornate carvings, brass details, and a glass face. It was dusty, but there was something oddly charming about it. "Nice clock," I said to the woman running the sale. She was in her 50s, with graying hair tied back in a messy bun. She seemed frazzled, constantly glancing over her shoulder like she was waiting for someone. She looked at the clock and hesitated before answering. "You can have it for $10, she said. "It still works, but I just don't want it anymore." That seemed like a steal for something so intricate, so I handed her the cash. As I was loading it into my car, she called out, "Be careful with it." I thought she meant because it was fragile, but now I'm not so sure. When I got home, Nate helped me clean it up, and we decided to put it on the mantel in our living room.
Yeah, $10 is a steal for anything at a yard sale. Might as well go ahead and grab it, but then if it's a fragile item, yeah, I would be careful. But if something spiritual is attached to it, oh no, I'll be trying to get rid of it quick.
It fit perfectly, and honestly, it made the whole room feel a little more cozy. Once we got it polished, we wound it up, and sure enough, it started ticking. The sound was rhythmic, almost soothing, and I thought I'd scored the deal of a lifetime. But that night, things started to feel off. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of the clock ticking. It wasn't loud, but it felt like it was echoing through the whole house. I chalked it up to being sensitive to new sounds and went back to sleep. The next day, though, I noticed something strange. The hands on the clock weren't moving. It was still ticking, but the time hadn't changed since we'd set it. I mentioned it to Nate, and he shrugged it off. "Maybe it's just decorative," he said. "Old clocks are weird like that." That explanation made sense, so I let it go. But over the next few days, I started feeling uneasy in the living room. Every time I sat on the couch, I felt like I was being watched. I'd catch myself glancing at the clock, half expecting to see the hands spinning wildly or something. But it just sat there, ticking away. A week later, things escalated. I was home alone one evening, folding laundry on the couch, when I heard a faint voice. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, but then I realized it was coming from the direction of the clock. I froze, straining to hear. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. I convinced myself I was imagining things and turned up the TV to drown it out.
Okay, I'll be like the boyfriend there for a minute because clock hands don't move. I would have thought it'd been something decorative, too. But hey, they got a bunch of decorative clocks at these home stores now that don't actually tell time. It's just for decoration purposes you hang on the wall. So I'll be kind of concerned to be like, okay, it's actually a mechanical clock. So why are these hands not moving? And the fact that she's now hearing voices coming from that direction, I knew it had to be something spiritual attached to it. She needs to go ahead and ditch this clock before it gets worse.
But that night, I woke up again around 2 a.m. This time, It wasn't just the ticking. I could hear faint scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood. The next morning, I told Nate everything. He's a skeptic about this kind of stuff, so he laughed it off, saying it was probably mice in the walls. But I could tell he was trying to hide how creeped out he was. We agreed to move the clock to the garage for a few days, just to see if that made a difference. The first night it was out of the house, I slept like a baby. No ticking, no scratching, no whispers. I felt a weird sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted. But when Nate went to the garage the next morning, he came back pale. "The clock's gone," he said. I thought he was joking. "What do you mean gone?" "It's not there," he said. "I put it on the workbench last night, but it's just gone." We searched the garage, the house, even the yard, but it was nowhere to be found. I started to think maybe someone had broken in and stolen it, but that didn't make sense. Why take the clock and nothing else? That night, I woke up again at 2 a.m. This time, the ticking was coming from the living room. My heart sank. I woke Nate, and we both went downstairs together. Sure enough, the clock was back on the mantel, ticking away like it had never left. We stared at it, neither of us saying a word. Finally, Nate grabbed it and carried it outside, setting it on the curb. "If someone wants it that badly, they can have it," he said. The next morning it was gone. We assumed someone had picked it up, and I prayed that was the end of it. But 2 days later, I found it sitting on our porch. There was a note tucked behind the glass face, written in shaky handwriting. "You can't get rid of it, neither could I." I felt like I was going to throw up. We called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. They suggested putting up cameras, which we did, but the clock hasn't moved since. It just sits there, ticking away. And I swear the whispers have gotten louder. Nate and I are planning to move soon. I don't know if the clock will follow us, but I can't stay in this house anymore. I've stopped winding it, but it hasn't stopped ticking.
Once a new owner picks it up, that clock will stay attached. Oh, Lordy. I mean, I don't know what else to do unless you decide to take a sledgehammer and break the darn thing. And I'll be bamboozled if it was put back together, you know. Oh, yeah. Anything haunted I do not want in my house. Best bet I'll put it in like a haunted paranormal museum. I mean, that's basically where they need to go.
A few months ago, my neighborhood had its annual community yard sale. It's one of those things where everyone sets up tables in their driveways, and people from all over town show up to browse. I've always enjoyed the event. It's a good way to clear out junk and meet the neighbors. This year, I decided to participate for the first time. I had some old furniture, books, and random stuff I didn't need anymore, so I figured why not? The morning of the sale, I set everything up in my driveway. I had a folding table for the smaller items and a couple of chairs so I could sit and relax between shoppers. Things started off pretty normal. People came and went, asking questions about prices or haggling over knickknacks. I even sold an old desk I'd been meaning to get rid of, so I was feeling pretty good. Around 11 a.m., this guy showed up. He looked to be in his late 40s or early 50s, dressed in a faded hoodie and jeans that were a little too big for him. He had this scruffy beard and these darting eyes that made me uneasy the moment I saw him. But I reminded myself not to judge. Yard sales bring in all kinds of people, right? He started picking through the items on my table, moving things around without really looking at them. After a few minutes, he held up a ceramic mug and asked, "How much?" $2, I said, trying to sound friendly. He nodded, but didn't put it down or make a move to pay for it. Instead, he set it back on the table and said, "You live here alone?" I froze for a second. That's not exactly the kind of question you expect from a stranger at a yard sale.
You got that right. I'm probably stalking the area out to see if he would be able to break in or not. I'll be asking why you need to know.
Trying to play it cool, I laughed awkwardly and said, "No, my boyfriend's inside." That was a lie. I don't even have a boyfriend. But something about this guy put me on edge. He gave me this weird little smile and said, "That's good. It's not safe for a woman to be alone." I didn't respond. I just busied myself with rearranging some books on the table, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. But he didn't. He kept hanging around, occasionally picking up items and asking random questions like, "What time does this end?" And, "Do you get many people here?" At one point, another shopper came by, and I was relieved to have someone else around. But the guy didn't leave. He just stood off to the side, watching me. Even after the other shopper left, he stayed. I started to feel trapped, like I couldn't just pack up and go inside without making it obvious I was uncomfortable. Finally, after what felt like forever, he picked up the ceramic mug again and handed me a crumpled $5 bill. "Keep the change," he said, grinning like he'd just done me a huge favor. "Thanks," I muttered, trying not to make eye contact. He stood there for a moment longer, then said, "Maybe I'll stop by later." And with that, he walked off down the street, mug in hand. I didn't think much of it after he left. I figured he was just one of those awkward people who doesn't pick up on social cues. I even laughed about it a little, texting my friend to tell her about the creepy mug guy. But then, about an hour later, I saw him again. He was standing on the sidewalk across the street, watching me. At first, I thought maybe he was just passing by, but he didn't move. He stood there for a solid 5 minutes, just staring. I pretended not to notice, but my heart was racing. Eventually, he turned and walked away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd come back. I decided to call it a day. I packed up my stuff as quickly as I could and hauled it back into the garage. By the time I was done, I was sweating, both from the effort and from the nervous energy. I locked the garage, double-checked the front door, and went inside to calm down. That night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again. A soft shuffling noise, like someone walking on gravel. My stomach dropped. I crept to the window and peeked out through the blinds. My yard was dark, but the street light at the corner cast just enough light for me to see the outline of someone standing in my driveway. It was him. He was holding the ceramic mug, staring at my house. He didn't move, didn't knock, didn't say anything. Just stood there like some kind of statue. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering to the operator that there was a man outside my house. She told me to stay on the line and keep the doors locked. As I waited for the police, I kept glancing out the window, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. When the police arrived, their headlights lit up the driveway, but the man was gone. They searched the area but didn't find anything. I showed them the mug he'd bought earlier and told them about the conversation we'd had. They said they'd patrol the neighborhood and let me know if they found him. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little noise made me jump, and I kept picturing him standing in my yard, holding that stupid mug. The next morning, I found the mug sitting on my front porch. It was cracked, like it had been dropped, and there was something stuffed inside. I tipped it over, and a folded piece of paper fell out. "I'll see you again soon," it said, written in shaky, scrawled handwriting. I moved out of that house 2 months later. I never saw the man again, but to this day, I get nervous any time I see someone lingering near my driveway. And I don't do yard sales anymore.
I'm sorry, but I'll be like trying to fight to protect where I live at because there ain't no way I'll be moving from a nice neighborhood because of a creep. But no, I wouldn't stand for nobody just lingering around looking at me instead of looking at the stuff I have for sale. Yeah, that is strange. Makes me sick that you can't even enjoy a yard sale anymore when people like that just shows up.
Last spring, My roommate Emma and I decided to host a yard sale to clear out some clutter and make a little extra cash. Between the two of us, we had enough stuff to fill the driveway.
Talk about spring cleaning, right?
Old clothes, books, kitchenware, and random decorations from our college days. We posted about it on Facebook Marketplace and put up a few signs around the neighborhood. The morning started out great. The usual crowd of early birds showed up right at 8 a.m., haggling over prices and making small talk. Most of the people were nice, polite, and didn't stick around too long. By 10, we'd already sold half the stuff, and Emma was joking about how we'd probably need a trip to Target to fill our apartment back up. Around 10:30, a man showed up. He was in his late 50s, with graying hair and glasses, wearing a faded green jacket and jeans. At first glance, he looked like any other shopper. He walked up slowly, hands in his pockets, and started browsing the tables. But something about him didn't feel right. He didn't look at the items the way the others had. Instead, he seemed to be scanning the scene, glancing at me, at Emma, at our house. "Morning," Emma said cheerfully. She always had this way of making people feel at ease. The man didn't respond. He picked up a picture frame from one of the tables, turning it over in his hands like he was inspecting it for some hidden detail. "This is nice," he finally said, his voice low and gravelly. "You girls selling anything else like this?" No, that's the only one," I said, trying to sound polite but feeling uneasy. He nodded and kept looking around. For the next 15 minutes, he lingered. Other shoppers came and went, but he stayed. He didn't buy anything, just hovered near the tables, occasionally picking something up and putting it back down.
I got a feeling that he ain't there to shop. He's just there to act like he's shopping and then look at your house, probably looking for ways to get in to steal something.
And he kept asking questions that didn't feel normal for a yard sale. "You live here long?" he asked at one point, looking directly at me. "Not too long," I said vaguely, pretending to reorganize a stack of books. "Just the two of you?" he asked, gesturing to Emma. "No boyfriends? No husbands?"
I'll be like, that ain't none of your business, dude. But I know what he's doing. He's just making sure there ain't no male figure around in the house to protect y'all if he decides to come back. That's what I'm thinking.
Emma, who hadn't picked up on the vibe yet, laughed and said, "Nope, just us." I shot her a look, but she didn't notice. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Must be nice," he said. "Quiet, peaceful." After that, he finally walked away, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Emma and I joked about him being a yard sale weirdo, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. An hour later, as we were wrapping up, I spotted him again. He was across the street, leaning against a tree, watching us. I nudged Emma and pointed him out. "That's weird," she said, her smile fading. "Why is he just standing there?" "I don't know," I said, "but let's finish up and get inside." We packed everything into the garage as quickly as we could and locked the door. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was probably harmless, just eccentric. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Around midnight, I was in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard a noise outside, like footsteps on gravel. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the window. Sure enough, there was someone in the driveway. It was him. He was standing in the same spot where the tables had been earlier, looking around as if he was searching for something. I froze, watching as he slowly walked up to the garage door and tried the handle. It was locked, thank God. But he didn't leave. Instead, he circled the house, disappearing from view. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering to the operator that someone was outside my house. While I was on the phone, I heard Emma's bedroom door creak open. She peeked out, looking confused and scared. "Someone's outside," I mouthed, and she nodded, grabbing her phone too. The police showed up within 10 minutes, but by the time they got there, the man was gone. They searched the area and found nothing, but they did see footprints in the flower bed near my bedroom window. The officers were nice, but there wasn't much they could do besides take a report. For the next few days, I was on edge. I kept the curtains drawn, triple-checked the locks, and jumped at every little noise. Emma tried to play it off like it was no big deal, but I could tell she was nervous too. The worst part came a week later when I got a message on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize. The profile picture was of a dog, and the name was something generic like Mike Smith. The message said, "Nice yard sale. Hope you're doing well. Maybe I'll stop by again sometime." I blocked the account immediately and called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without proof it was him. I ended up deactivating my Facebook account and staying at my parents' house for a while. It's been months now, and I haven't seen him again. But every time I hear a strange noise at night or see someone lingering too long in my neighborhood, I feel that same icy fear. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I hope to God I never find out.
Yep, it always has to be some weird creep that will make people scared to live in their own home. He probably was stocking the place out maybe to probably rob you guys later, or he was just a prowler. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Terrors videos like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and that's the